Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Easy English. Today I am going to teach you how you can improve your spoken English at home on your own whenever you look online. To find out top tips for improving your spoken English. The number one tip is always talk to native speakers. Talk to speakers of English, practice conversation. And that just isn't a realistic possibility for all of us. I know that so many of you will find yourselves in situations where conversing with native speakers or speakers of English in general just isn't an option. It's not widely available. Sometimes it's to do with money. You don't have the finances available to do that. It could be a confidence thing where actually you don't feel ready to speak to people yet and want to practice a little bit on your own first. It could just be that you don't know where to start. So I've got lots of tips in today's video and I hope to help each and every one of you, as always. Let's start with tip number 1. This tip is learn full phrases, not just individual vocabulary words. Now there is a place for studying individual vocabulary words that helped me a lot with my own learning journey when I was learning Spanish. But if you are particularly focused on improving your spoken English, then try learning entire phrases. When we say a word on its own, we say it in a very flat way. For example, amazed when I say that word as part of a sentence like I was amazed. It has a different tone, some inflection, some emphasis, more stress. Listen to speakers of English when you're watching TV, watching a YouTube video, or listening to the radio. Whatever you're doing to try and immerse yourself in English, try and pick up on those individual phrases and work out where in the phrase they're pushing the pitch up or saying it slightly more loudly. Pause it if you can and imitate it. It's going to help you sound really natural when you speak English. Another part of this is if you do pick up on an individual vocabulary word that you want to remember, make sure you also include an example of it used in a sentence as well. That's why with the majority of my vocabulary videos, I always include an example. If you write it down, make little notes and dashes to try and remember how the speaker said it. Tip number 3. Let's go back to analyzing and listening to what speakers of English say and how they say it. But I'm not talking about pronunciation and tone of voice this time. This time I want to look at what they say grammatically. I know that grammar and spoken English don't tend to go hand in hand, but I think it's important here. Now let me make this clear. I do not think that learning grammar is the most important part of learning a language at all. You would never teach a baby grammar, yet they grow up to be fluent in a language, but you need to bear in mind that a baby is immersed the entire time. Lots of people say learn English like a baby, but what they don't bear in mind is that babies are immersed in English or their mother tongue the entire time. They have the most wonderful opportunity to pick up on all the spoken English and all the grammar and all the vocabulary without even realizing it. Bless them. Even then, it takes them a couple of years to speak fluently. Yes, of course their brains are still developing, but the point I want to make is there is a place for grammar, but it's not the be-all and end-all. I really don't see the value in going through a grammar book cover to cover. I really don't see the value in that, and it's something that I have never done in my own language learning journey. What I did do was essentially fill in the gaps. I was constantly on the lookout for holes or gaps in my grammar knowledge. I think you should go through time filling those gaps bit by bit, rather than approaching grammar as this big textbook that you have to work through. It goes back to looking at full phrases again. Look at those phrases. Is there something that you can't explain or that doesn't sound right to you in your head? That should be the topic that you research. That should be the topic that you bring to the table with your conversation partner or your English teacher, or you search on an online forum. There are some amazing language forums with some really enthusiastic teachers who seem to give up their time for free. I can't believe the quality of answers that I get from language forums. I doubt grammar all the time. I'm constantly looking it up. This brings me to tip number 4, which is don't let anything go. Don't drop anything. I know the feeling. You hear a word or a phrase that you don't understand and you think, oh, I can't be bothered. I'll remember it and do it later. You won't. 9 times out of 10 you will not remember it. It's like when you come up with a really good tune in your head and you think, oh, I'll remember that tomorrow. How could I ever forget something like this? And then you just can't. The next day it's gone. It's lost. Potentially forever. Every time you have a doubt. Don't let it escape you. Just don't let it escape. Write it down immediately. If you can't write it down because you don't know how it's spelled, use the recording voice notes function on your phone. If it's not possible for you to see a teacher every single week, save up all of these doubts and book in 1 hour a month and see how many of those doubts you can clear up with them in that session. But please look into my eyes and tell me, Sophia, I will not let my next doubt go. But don't stress yourself out at the same time. Obviously, you have to take everything with a pinch of salt. You've got to make it work for you. But I find if I come up with a fantastic video idea and I don't write it down immediately, that video will never be made, and it's the same with your grammar and vocabulary doubts. Let's move on to number 5. The previous tips were more about theory. Now I'm going to talk about putting it into practice. When I was learning Spanish, living in Spain and conversing with lots of Spaniards, there was one topic that at first caused me a lot of anxiety and then over time caused me a lot of joy and excitement. I just loved it. And that is telling anecdotes and telling stories, especially funny ones. I really think there is no better feeling than making someone laugh in the language that you're learning. It's such a good feeling. There are very few people in this world that can just launch into a story and have everyone engaged and interested. Some people are blessed with this skill. I'm not one of them. If I want to tell a good story, I have to prepare it in advance and have it up my sleeve ready. I have to do this in English, let alone in another language. If you want to feel funny, interesting, and engaging, I really urge you to practice and sort of perfect your anecdotes and your personal stories. Things that you are going to want to tell to lots of different people. I have maybe 5 or 6 entertaining stories that I have ready in case there's a gap in the conversation. If I meet someone new, my poor friends and my poor fiancé have probably heard these stories 30 times each. I encourage you to write your stories down. Try to do as best a job as you can of correcting the grammar and making sure it flows. Then potentially bring it to a speaker of English to correct for you. Stories don't have to be perfect when you tell them. In fact, it looks weird and sounds weird when you read it out like a robot on your own at home. Practice the story, read it aloud a couple of times, then have a go reading it with no prompts. If you have this preparation, you'll feel so much better when you finally talk to another speaker of English. Great topics you could use are funny mistakes that you've made in English. I know that I always love hearing my students laugh about the mistakes they've made. It shows that you're a really chilled and funny person, and it's entertaining for me to hear. In the UK, we love self-deprecating humor, which shows that you can laugh at yourself. You could almost mock yourself, put yourself down. We love that. We also love irony. I've actually created an entire video on British humor. I'll put it in the description box. It's called British Humor Explained with Examples, which sounds like the least fun video ever, but I think it might be able to help you, so I hope that's clear. Practice your anecdotes, practice your stories, and even if your goal is not to be funny, practice the things that you know. You will have to repeat again and again and again. Ethan, how did you end up in your job? What were your school days like? How did you meet your partner? Practice those stories so that they just roll off the tongue. It might seem like cheating, but if it is, then I'm a cheat, because that's what I do. Number 6 is listen to chatty podcasts. There has been a podcast revolution all across the world, especially in the UK. We absolutely love podcasts, and there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily famous already starting podcasts with their friends, and they just chat.